All right, sweet. So it says I'm live. I don't have my glasses on because I was getting a bit like headache, but truthfully, I haven't really had much sensitivity with light and sound or anything over the last couple weeks. And in today's video, going live here on Sunday, August 3rd, I really just kind of wanted to review some of the documents that I've been working on over the last, I don't know, month or so. Is it's not just a couple little things. Like I've got a lot of documents. There's also my July, um, my July writing. So like this is literally a journal for like the whole month. It ends up being right now on page 44 with 17,437 words in it. And, these are just random, not so random, but just thoughts that have come up over the course of the month, the last month, in order to kind of assist me in writing out chapter 3, right? So I've got a couple pages in here, and where we kind of leave off at the end of the teaser, right? So there's a teaser of this book that ends right here. This isn't all like actually in order yet, or completely defined. It's just kind of the part of the book right now that's in work in progress. I'm going to change out the battery again real quick. This is what happens. It's what happens whenever I choose to go live for no reason whatsoever. It just always happens to be at the very bottom of the bank of battery power. But nonetheless, lyrical movement brings us into with a quote saying by Bob Marley. Don't gain the world and lose your soul. Wisdom is better than silver or gold. Love the life you live the life you love. The greatness of a man is not in how much wealth he acquires, but in his integrity and his ability to affect those around him positively. Pretty common sense type of a statement, you might think. But nonetheless, it comes into question a lot of the time as I write these recent songs, and as I call it into question, a lot of the things that I observe about my own work, like even going public and live on this video, for example. There's almost a lot of times seems to be almost a frequency or an energy or an abundance of direction. No matter what I say or do or how it comes out, there's a reflection that comes in. And so like here's one of the recent songs called Nothing Changes, for example. And this came in like literally really late at night, sometime later last week or mid last week, where I'd been journaling or writing something long, and since I wrote the first song, which we'll get into as well, called Nobody Booyah, it was like I looked over, and regardless of the time of night, I was probably because it was so late at night. I was already like at a depleted energy and the meditative state in which like the mind is just kind of already ready to just blech out everything, fell out. So I looked over here where there's a blanket of my puppy, my younger puppy from Kiwi's litter. His name was Sunshine, and he passed away the day before the solstice, the winter solstice this last year. So he'd been living with my sister, and on this blanket it says, "You're my sunshine, my only sunshine." Of course, being his name was Sunshine, and the first three words came out that you are sunshine. And there's a flow though to these words, and even earlier today I got a call from a friend who is across the country still on the East Coast, and he found these words apparently that really hit him. And I do find that a lot of the time with my words and the frequency in which I write. It's sometimes there's a little jokey side in it, but there's definitely a very intentional type of energy to the words and where they're coming from. That's almost impossible to like just speak out loud and say in a common tongue and in a common conversation, just to like, oh, hey, guess what I thought today. And I find that that's what sets a song apart from the general conversation, is able to communicate something that is a lot of times like just more difficult to explain when it's a two-way conversation. So from that standpoint, I just started writing, "You are sunshine from behind the clouds," right? So like we're already painting a picture as though there's sunshine, but it's bright and it's illuminating, but there are clouds, preventing the direct contact, the actual connection of that sun. And then it says, "I can sense you and feel you and know that you're always around." So if I can sense you and feel you, I know that you're always around, and know that you're always around. It's just like that's what gives power to my own vision, right? To my eyes to see and interpret things. And it's because of the sunlight. And then the second line goes into the whispers. So we've now got one element of sunshine for the eyes, but then there's whispers, which is the ears. "You are whispers in the midst of the sound." Now there's a distinction between sound and noise. Sound is kind of like the natural element, the most pure, like the pure tones. They actually exist on specific frequencies. Noise ends up becoming kind of the cacophony of like annoyance, right? It's almost like an unnatural occurrence. And this, on that note, real quick too, is like I'm almost convinced that moving forward in terms of like writing the book and different things, like to avoid noise, I'm going to probably have to move from the digital space of writing on Word documents and while connected to the internet and so forth, like to actually handwriting, so that it can become a much more natural flow of my own thoughts and words in reference to the universe as opposed to digital. Because, from where I'm coming from anyway, I completely believe that no matter what, the keystrokes on my computer, if it's connected to the Internet of Things whatsoever, like it is right there, ready to be broadcast. It's such a bigger thing, and if I really want to have any delay whatsoever, it's going to have to come from as a result of putting it from pen to paper in the most natural form. But anyway, when we're talking about the hearing, right, because that's why it's annoying to me, is because that's what I'm hearing is the whispers in the midst of the sound. Like when I wake up early in the morning and I hear a word that comes through, this is what's been occurring, not so subtle ways over the last month. And it's just gotten not louder, but just more apparent. There's this line, and I was actually going to change it. So not listened to, but I have listened for every last word that's uncommonly found. So uncommonly found. This is like, when I made a shift in the project I was working on, for example, a couple years ago or a year ago, where all the narratives were like using this one word, excited, because Knox like ending as a variable is X, and it was like citing the X, citing, seeing the X of things. And there was this moment in time where something was going on in the media, and I interpreted it in an interesting way and utilized that energy to kind of modify the path and the way I was finishing the project. And so I started splicing the cuts into like smaller incremental pieces. So, as to turn it into a maze of things, or like to allow for the subject or the person who wants to be invited into this project to not just go where I want them to go necessarily, but to allow them the choice. Choice is a really big thing. And when we're hearing what we're listening to and with what we're seeing in combination, it's important to have that element. So that came to mind and it modified my project. And essentially I got to this point where I started hearing almost instantly the word amazing as opposed to excited. And, it's just those types of reiterations of whatever I'm working on my computer, in the outer world. But if you walk into a doctor's clinic in a craze and you're in fear and you're subjecting yourself to it from a defeated mindset, that's natural. Like the first phase of development, that's almost no matter what's going to occur. And so there becomes the choice, right? When it occurred for me, well, am I here to actually succumb and believe just the words of a doctor because he noticed I saw and I heard something that was so unnatural to me that it spun me out and made me a little cray-cray? Well, that's what the next line comes in. Nothing changes if I'm not changing. My answer to that question is no. When I had that situation occur for me, it came because I stood my ground. I went through whatever orientation that they required or requested from me as the state. But the second that was done, I wasn't going to just accept a medication and a that interference of my own thinking mind and my own experiential being for the sakes of being medicated my whole life. And I think this is what separates the few from the many, perhaps. I'm not 100% certain, but I know that it separated me from what I hear a lot of the times from people who are just still caught in that paradigm of just believing a doctor for the sakes of them being a doctor. Now, I'm sure that we all get to a point where we need help and assistance, but it's not a lifelong remedy if we don't allow it to. And this is where the words that I'm looking for and I'm listening for, not just to be at the beckon or the echo chamber coming back at me, but where I begin to be the speaker, being the change. Hey, Chloe, stop. And then the next verse comes in, it's like, you're okay, so not everyone's queso. You're okay, so not everyone's queso. Hey, you're done. Inside. For crying out loud. This dog just loves her freaking food. Even if there's no food in the bowl, she's just got to get to it. But anyway, this next verse is more gimmicky. It's more for the sakes of the singing aspects. But it's to say you're okay, but not everyone's okay. And the second line here, though I'd put you on nachos and tell them they're all crazy now, is more essentially stating this is the general paradox of somebody who goes through the hearing and the seeing for the first time. You may not seem like you're okay, but it is in everything. It is on everything. And they basically are telling us you're crazy now. But the falsetto, this next line, this falsetto is so commonly drowned. The falsetto is a point where you sing and you go, oh, and you can hit a more airy part of the vocal inflection without as much diaphragm support. It exists in a much higher frequency, but it's also uses the word false, right? So this falsetto is so commonly drowned. So the sorrow, it's almost like the chemical induction, infusement. Essentially, they utilize it as refinement of our minds, but it's just drowning the truth. by critics and lingering voices, their noises abound. Noise again. So from sound to noises abound. That it becomes such a massive concoction of feedback that if you're not really fundamentally grounded in the aspects of your own self, of my own self, then that's what would occur and has occurred in the past. So again, we go back to nothing changes if I'm not changing. And then it gets embedded with this sort of line, they told me I'm wasting my prime, my mid-years, like where most people are out chasing tail and, having babies and taking on extensive responsibilities, house and cars and like financial obligations that essentially just set us back in debt. Becoming subject as prisoners to whatever we're signing on the dotted line for. But they told me I'm wasting my time with my head in the clouds speaking rhymes. Well, I'm not staying just to feel the pain. Nah. Gain. Again, but nah, gain. So if I'm not staying just to feel the pain, like I'm not here just to subject myself to the energy of being abused back. I'm here to stand for something. And what am I standing for? Nah, never again hate. And then this is gain or again, because this ain't my first rodeo. Like I've been doing this regularly. And so when I face things like this, the nothing changes is because essentially I'm essentially trying to fight back for the first time in my life without getting myself to the point of desperation down the road where some doctor is going to say, oh, well, you're seeing ghosts all over again. That's not what's actually occurring. It's an abuse of power that exists in this world through visual and audio sensitivities, like the physical front. Because whatever it is that exists on the tip of my tongue, whether it comes out in song or in this conversation, in this presentation, that's, the wall. So, but as a result of those things in the time frame between writing all these words and getting to the point where this song was just kind of falling out of me this last week, we continue with the words, but we sat there and heard truthful prayers, like for the first time, getting to a point where like complete surrender is possible, like listening to my own inner self of what it is like that exists between me or sets me apart from where I am and where I think the world is. Their words did bleed as we took the lead. Recognizing that if my words became positive, they became a higher frequency, then that also gave way to a more positive aspect and utterance within the world, right? It doesn't always have to be reactive energy field for me to be in. There's a possibility for me to also transform. If I transform myself positively and more aligned, more centered, then here's the result. Then we can take the lead and guide us towards a better arena, better, more well lit, like get rid of the clouds, basically, which is where the next line comes. The dark corner seemed brighter somehow. The corners that I'd end up or being cornered, feeling that way, even though they were still dark corners and not completely lit up, they were brighter, and I was able to go through those things a little bit better. And the choir sang higher than me. Because no matter what, my voice just exists here. More often than not, it's been more monotone. It's not been as capable with the vocal inflections in the voice and the singing and all these things, but the words are there. But they sing higher than me. They sing more broadly than I can. And for that, there's gratitude and things of that nature. So that's an important aspect of where this is coming from. Again, nothing changes if I'm not changing. And then we get to the second page over here, where we're really kind of drawing into the conclusion of both sides of the coin. Like, just because the first time I heard and I saw and I found the words like uncommon, there were answers. But those answers came not from like the excessive, impulsive, seeking. That was a part of it, but the answers came much later, like after the consequence of those things. And that's not the consequence of certain actions, as I've experienced them, doesn't necessarily feel initially as a worthwhile endeavor, if you will. So the verse here goes, there are answers from beyond surrenders. It's like finally when we get to that point where it's like, whatever, like acceptance, whatever it is that's going on here, I surrender to it. All I got to do here is observe it and try to do better. Because this next line, although knowing is not really hope, it just complicates now. Because the knowing of something, or the pretense and the feeling as though I know something, I've realized something, the aha, the laughability of my own self-reflection is revealed to myself. It just complicates the now. And like, what I believe to be true and occurring as it exists right now here isn't actually what is occurring. There's actually a completely different possibility that exists within the fold. And so that's the aha of it. When I'm at like the bottom rung, when I'm at the rock bottom place. We're not hiding while everyone's fighting. So it's like as a result of knowing something or thinking I know something, diving a little bit deeper into self, there becomes an important element of that is emerging from the cocoon and spreading the wings of the butterfly, if you will, becoming the transformed being. And the way that we do that is by recognizing that we're all fighting some inner conflicts and trials that prevent the frown from turning upside down. Maintaining the frown as opposed to really like embracing what is almost comical about it. It's not comical, but in the long run, getting past it sufficiently, we can finally get to a point of this like laughing at ourselves for even believing the bull crap of what we've previously believed in. So again, we get to the point of reiteration. Nothing changes if I'm not changing. Then there was, in the same moment, because I had written a word, harmony, and then the very next day there was the New York mass shooting. Whatever occurred, I don't know, because I wasn't really diving into it. I'll recognize the headline, but I'm not about getting sucked into the whole narrative, because the world that I see, and that we're still existing in, is algorithmically inclined to just feed me exactly the most devastating aspects of the news. And it's not always just one voice. It's like everybody has to speak on whatever it is that's occurring. And I really just it's not that I don't have time for it, because I probably do, but why would I even sabotage the positive energy that I have in my life for obsessing about what occurred from another individual's perspective? No matter what or how devastating or positive it is, if it doesn't really affect where I am at currently, then why should I be obsessive about the end result of somebody else's crazy nonsense that exists, many thousands or 1,000 miles away? It's only by algorithmic tendencies that gets populated into my feed and says, oh, hey, this is what's most pressing for you to pay attention to right now. And if you don't, it's almost like it's promoting, if you don't care about this right now, then you lack it's almost like you don't care about your nation, or there might be like certain subtle types of energies that would exist within a person to why they would lean in on following those types of news narratives, as opposed to just being grounded and, again, right back here where we actually are in the present moment. It's just complicating my now. It's complicating my present. It's distorting what I'm thinking about. It's stealing my attention away. So that's what it says here. While the violence exists on the news, my backyard there is peace in lieu of amusements. So, amuse, The individual would be amuse, and the meaning, immense, meaning of mense. This is like the paradox of language sometimes, like when we utilize the what are they called? Syllables. Syllables. They become separated words, and amusements, not intended for you. And so let me circle back. You're okay, so not everyone's queso, though I'd put you on nachos and tell them they're all crazy now. This falsetto is so commonly drowned by the critics in lingering voices, their noises, not abound this time, but surround. And it's like, if there is something about this that I would prefer to change, not just from myself, but if my voice, if my observations of this song and where this is coming from can really be fully broken down for you, this is why. This is what that is. That's, if nothing is going to change, if I'm not changing for you, if I'm not choosing to limit my attention going in those directions, if I'm not willing to turn my eye to the absolute nonsense of these algorithms, and if I'm not willing to stand firmly upon the words that I put on paper and be more diligent in my own process of not just revealing all this stuff to myself, but attempting to put it out to a broader audience so they too can understand more depth of what they're actually up against in the midst of a world that, you know, is suffering in one way or another, unknowingly or knowingly, conscious or unconscious. And like, these are necessary jumps through the hoop in order to maintain my humanity, essentially, and to actually even exist in this world in any capacity whatsoever, as it seems, you know, because it's very difficult for a person who goes through this and to just feel like they're constantly on an island. But I am aware now, more than I have ever been aware before, that the voice and the inflection and the efforts and the diligence to attempt at doing work like this, writing lyrics like this, it finds its way, whether I've got 1 million views or not. And so there you go. That's this song. The next song I'll go to is Nobody Booyah. And this is more of a response. I already spoke about this on a Facebook Live, and I'll go through this one fairly quickly. But it is based on the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. I do, a deer, my female deer. Rays came down gleaming from the sun. Mi, fa, sol, LA is your town for now. And then we get back to saying I do again. Okay, so like that first verse, it's gimmicky, but the words in it, the ending, nobody booyah, there's a distortion. Like there's a line in Stairway to Heaven where sometimes words have two meanings. That line, the nobody, means a couple different things to me, as does booyah. It's not really for you to understand, it's for me to understand. So, you know, as I wrote this, like, you know, my muse, the woman, you know, that's got my heart in so many ways and has kind of been there at the background for the reason that I wear my ring, you know, all of a sudden she goes into action at the same moment, essentially, of me writing these things, and the relationship there exists, and we're not necessarily in the same place. So that's what this song is really about. It's like, right, you have flown across the country, been all the places, made so many smiling faces. I'm watching her do, you know, work in the field and putting out all this positive energy and just being her most wonderfully beautiful self, and, you know, not for just the sakes of entertaining, but just you know, paving a way for me to possibly also, the next line, wander in. The commitment has been consistent, and you made it possible for me to wander in. I saw that, you know, and I observed that. And through it, there is this desire of sorts to connect more with her in the creative space, However, I just kind of needed to observe that for a week, because like all this ends up coming true throughout this last week. I grew, I saw, and came to understand that being me was always my greatest gift. So I'm trying to lean in on that more as a result of the week, as opposed to resorting backwards to like old patterns of behavior. Although I know that would get me to a specific place, it's almost always seems like the setup will just feel like a recurrence of the same old energy. And even though I know now, to create Knox as the brand, a more publicly well-known brand, might get me to the sphere of publicly becoming known, and allow me the opportunity to actually exist within her same field and in her actual on that level. It also is the element beyond writing the book that would get me to a completely different paradoxical presentation and presence within the world relative to the world, where all of a sudden, no matter what, as I do things in real time, there's an actual immediate consequence to them. And not that I'm necessarily afraid of that, but that's a whole different new frontier. I'm just getting comfortable existing here where I've set up, because it's only been like a couple months since I set in here, and I've been putting in all this work, but things happen really quick when you get to the clarity of things. And then, the last line in that stanza is, I know it's safe to play a game or again, which mostly I just lean in on again, because I'm not a big fan of the word game, playing games, but it is fun. Like, I'm finally getting to a point where just kind of enjoying the process and doing my best not to like be completely immersed in every single aspect. Like I need to actually temper, and I recognize the relationship. I recognize the connection. I'm in preparation mode, but everything is on the up and up, right? So ending that with nobody booyah again, with you no matter where you are, nobody booyah. This whole phase of it is more for the rhythm of the song building to this. It's a whole slew of words after this section from here through here that ends up wrapping around to the original. So we'll just run through this really quick, but from sorrow to success, obviously from the bottom to the top, from the defeated to where I feel like I am now, capable of understanding and being present to where I am. The instigation is, a poking. It's like, hey, burp, burp, burp. I'm curious. When we provoke or poke the bear, we get the claws. And so that's how this whole thing started for me, is that I came in with a very egoic tendency with Knox and just kind of utilized the branding and threw it on every little thing in utterance with all those words of nah. Like nah, if we look at it just spiritually, just fundamentally, scripturally, we're talking about, Anunnaki, Enoch, the book of Nahum, it just goes on and on. Like, so through the book of Matthew, it talks about, those who seek will find, and then those who knock, will be revealed. So that's where the truth has been revealed to me, is because I did all that work and utilized my branding in order to get the answers to the questions that led me to my low bottoms, and then revealed to me what the truth was, and then it just really distorted my present moment. And I have had a hard enough time, but not the worst time, not as bad as I imagine other people might have it, with my base knowledge, with my background, with my study, with, all the books, not necessarily read every page, but studied all the modalities and the variations, so that I can kind of get a more broad paradigm shift of what someone might believe versus another, and how they really all orient to the same universal truth. But when I instigate, that's what revealed the manifestation. Not a manifestation for the sakes of like, I want a new car, and so it's just going to come out of nowhere, but revealed the manifestation of my own actual power and energy that exists within me when I use my voice, when I go live, when I put something out into the world. That's the manifestation, is like to even interpret and see this echo chamber that's now making whatever words that I put on paper like bigger and broader to the bigger world. Not directly, but in the roundabout way. You know, it's known as what would you call it? I have a book down here. I'll get back to it. It'll come to me. I forget right for now. And then it's like we're going to circle back on the not just now, here and now, right? So not just now and then. It was from up in here, for now and then, in the Do Re Mi stanza. We're circling back to that, not just now and then, but always in my heart and soul is this individual. Like there's always been a connection there. Ever since 7, 8 years ago when we first got acquainted, and I went through my very first project on not first project, but like my bigger master project from that arena in that time 7 years ago. And we're here defining her as the Princess of Discs, right? And the discs represent more of an earth energy, the grounded energy. So the Princess of Discs, or the Page of Discs, it's a playful energy. A page is a younger individual who, gets out there and is the mix of things, right? Being in all the places and seeing so many smiling faces. So it's a circling back on that. So she's always in my heart and soul, though. It's the Princess of Discs. She exists like a river ever widening, right? So it's like water is just, there's not as much going out into the soils to like feed so much of the direction that it's going in. And that's almost like that river just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and broader and broader and broader and broader. And then the next line, or a chasm that is gliding, right? A chasm is like a distance or a canyon between this side and the other side, but it's gliding as opposed to it's kind of a paradox of language in that line. Blindingly wondrous, like wondrous in the faculty that you can't even see it because it's disguised, essentially. That's what these words are meaning to me. Blindingly wondrous, like a phoenix on the winds, you made it safe again. So like a phoenix rising, right? That's fairly well known fire element. So we have earth, water, and fire. All right. And these are the three base energies of our elemental structure from our root chakra, our sacral chakra, and our solar plexus chakra. And where does that lead us? To an opening and a breath of love within the heart, the air energy. You made it safe again for me to praise the ways our voices linger on the tips. So we're jumping through that. There's a balance of energies between the lower frequencies and the higher frequencies, where light and ether, it's the sound that the third eye and the throat chakra balance the equation. It's complicated if you don't fundamentally understand chakras and things of that nature, but that's what this is about. Then they praise the ways our voices linger on the tips. It's a matter of how she's been utilized in my editing processes in the past. Smiling, you speak to me, and oh so casually saying, I've missed you and you've missed me finally. Can we sing in harmony? That word, harmony. And, that word, harm, again, it's syllable breakout, harm on New York, LA. She went from that side of the country to the other side of the country, smiling, and then within that time frame of landing, there's this synchronistic type of thing that occurs in the world, and all of a sudden, everybody's in an uproar over it, and algorithmically, it's just to the whole universe. And that's the magnification I'm talking about, that is nefarious, inauthentic. I'm not sure about it 100%, but I observe it now. I don't allow it to modify or captivate my full attention, if you will, anymore. But that moves us into this final flowing stanza of words that gets reiterated double time as well. So we are adrift, but oh so closely within what has become more than fantasy, and here we're happily experiencing everything and nothing all the same. From on the page of wands you dared to hear my words, provoking you to fall in love with me. We are adrift, but oh so closely within what has become more than fantasy, and here we're happily experiencing everything and nothing all the same. From on the page of wands you dared to hear my words, provoking you to fall in love with me, and I in you I do. A dear, my female dear, rays came down gleaming from the sun. Mi fa so, LA is your town for now, and then we get back to saying I do again. And as I, saw today, she's back in LA, and nobody booyah with you no matter where you are. Nobody booyah. And the world kind of made it all for full circle, and things we'll get another week out of this. So again, like, these songs are somewhat complicated, but from my own personal standpoint, they mean a lot on the more subtle aspects of them. So that, I finally moved to this song, which came out today. Some of the other songs also came from the tarot card readings, and some of the utterances, like the Princess of Discs is in the energy of the deck that I'm utilizing now. And there's a reference to the Page of Wands. The page is the princess, but there's different elements. One is the earth element, one is the fire element. And so she's a fire element. But this song came out separate from all that as a different reading that I did today. So when I did the reading, I tried to base the initial lyrics for a chorus that I've been playing a lot, and all of a sudden these words fall out. And because the next chapter is called Movements, the very first card that I drew, the word under it, the main focal point of that word was movement. And I think the movement, sometimes, we think of it as gyration and a lot of accelerated, accentuated, and exaggerated dancing and singing and bouncing around off the walls kind of thing. But sometimes movements they're the subtle movements. That's what this is about. This is a song more about moving from stillness into action, and as a result of feeling that stillness and being in that silence, being between the choice, if you will. So movements, the winds of change have been the same. Like, the first word is basically saying, although it's windy out here, there's a lot of possibilities of change, but they're still the same. There's nothing that's actually occurring. Again, movements, the colored wands are 8. So that was the card, the 8 of Wands. It depicts 8 different wands, all pointing in a similar direction, and the end of each wand had 8 different colors. I think other than red, or I can't remember exactly, but there are 2 iterations of a color the same. But nonetheless, like, that's just my specific deck, that it's based on the card itself. And that card just happened to have the word movements. And then the next card below it, as I was going through having a communication with the deck, essentially was the 4 of Cups. And the word under that is meditation. It's a balanced energy. It's water energy. It's emotions. So this stanza is there, 4 cups of meditation. It's almost being stated in that frame of reference as though this is an ingredients list, or a method to creating something. So if we take 4 cups of meditation and the 8 wands, right? Colored wands are 8, so we're going to count the stanzas: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is a repeat, and this is a reiterance. So there's 8 different stanzas. 8 different 4 lines. It's very simple, very straightforward with this song. That's where that came from. So this one is 4 cups of meditation, fills us up and lets us drink. We've heard enough of dedication. Again, I use that word because dedication, as they hesitate to speak. Recognizing sometimes when I'm listening to the words, I'm almost like put this out there as an anticipation that I'll be seeing more of that hesitation to speak. And it's also to lean in on the fact that other people are just, like, it seems to me, as we do in songs and communication levels, we're not speaking plain language anymore. Everything gets hidden in these little breakout points, and that's the distortion. That's what this is about. Back to movement. So movements becomes movement. So if movement allows the seeds of change to breathe, right, giving a chance, the seed doesn't necessarily blossom into anything unless it has proper nutrition. Movement occurs sitting within the silence communally. So understanding, like, if I do become silent, if I do take a moment of meditation, really what I'm sitting in silence, but I'm not the only one. And what's existing in that space, if I allow it to be, is there's a community that exists within that. That's what that line is. And then we went into other cards that depicted the star. The star is a major arcana, the 17th major arcana card in the deck. And it has a lot of its own, it's a positive elemental card, but it depicts an individual standing in the water waist deep and looking across the pond, if you will, and then there's peaks in the distance and the sun precisely directly center above. And the colors and all the different things within it brought about these next stanzas. So, yeah. There is a star beyond the water, shining above the distant peaks. Stained glass distorts a simple image, but it's not invisible to me. Because right below the star card ended up becoming the 5 of discs, which has 5 stained glass stars. So the discs exist as stained glass. And so that's where that was. And the word for that is destitution. So beyond the star, like it seems like it's really far away, but that's what these next lines are about, is the middle way of this, of the reading that I took. And this is what kind of came through the reading for me. When we notice destitution, separation makes us weak, but through a resolution, our eyes hear and our eyes seek. We waded in the water, anticipated its waist deep. Interpreting the distance between here and there, we leap. So it's kind of, there's always the star is separate, and destitution is the separating factor, like making me feel weak. Like, what do we need to do? Well, leap, go in all the way, fully dive in, become immersed. It's almost like a baptismal type of aspect here. So taking that leap of great faith. So beyond the climate was a lie, so much sorcery disguised. This is a completely different stanza too, where it brings a whole different energy to it. So if you break down the word climate, as I've heard the word climate and climate change for decades now, essentially, when you really break it down, see, lie. And if we look at the world as a game of chess, which I do on occasion, we see the lie, mate, checkmate. So that's what this line is. Beyond the climate was a lie, so much sorcery disguised. That's language revealed. Depictions of our lives were practically reflected in the skies. The skies, like in the skies, the skies. Depictions of our lives were fractally reflected in the skies. It's like, okay, when I see this echo chamber, yeah, you're not seeing my voice, my words specifically, but they're out there. They're in the skies. They're being reflected. They're being magnified. And so the star again, the stars which fell near here, not there, near here, but not there, tell all the tales that quell the shell. Quelling is, to quell something is to subdue or suppress it. It's kind of that basic elemental structure of what's going on right now. Like if we interpret it from modern day, you know, current uh, narratives, it's the cancel culture, it's the lack of freedom of speech, it's the distortions, you know, it's fake news, it's all those other things. So the last thing is letters and numbers fail to sell. The truth is marred by fairy tales set to sell. It's kind of a should put a separation in there. There we go. Letters and numbers fail to sell. The truth is marred by fairy tales. It's almost like, okay, well, this seems like a pipe dream. It seems almost fantasy. It seems so beyond everything, but it's just being marred by that illusion of fairy tales when in fact these things are actually occurring. It's just, you know, with the lack of acceptance, the lack of faith, the lack of a lot of different things, I imagine for a lot of different people, that's what separates us and has us go back to that destitution, that five of discs, that middle way, being stuck between the beginning and the end and constantly fighting and not feeling like there's any actual action going in any way, shape, or form. We don't want that necessarily. So we conclude with, if faith is indeed a destination, then singing these words is creation of a world that is listening, not complacent, and to reveal the ones who have been existent. So I know I'm not the only one that's gone through all these things. I know I'm not the only one that sees what I see or feels what I feel and all the other things. The movement hasn't just occurred for me, as when it occurred for me, it ended up also occurring for a lot of other people. But they're still dealing with this. The burdens and despairs that exist in the air. Our tensions are feeling when we think we're not breathing. So like the tens, right? I did a extension reading. Tensions is a spin-off of two different cards. It was there were, on the third stanza over here, there were two other cards. One was the Princess of Swords, and the other one was a King of Swords. So it was like really leaning in on that mental side of everything. So when I got to that and then extended it to the 8 cards, I saw I only had 6 cards writing the majority of this song, and I needed something else elementally to expand, and they just so happened to come out as tens. Well, endings are actually also beginnings, and you know the 2 words in the 10 of Swords and the 10 of Wands was despair, or burdens and despair. Like it's like 10 knives stabbing somebody in the back with the 10 of Swords. That's related. That was coming off of the Princess, and the King of Swords gave the 10 of Wands, which is like a bundle of sticks. Like it's just a burden to hold all of these sticks too closely to the vest. So, but where do they exist? They exist in the air. Our tensions and feelings when we think we're not breathing. You know, thinking. That's what. So the tens, there are 2 tens, they're spin-offs. When we think we're not breathing, when we forget the physical elements of like what exists below our heart, in our lungs, below there, we need to feel the passion, we need to feel the creativity, we need to know who we are fundamentally. Those bottom 3 elements of the Princess. So the Princess again, but this time a Princess of Swords, might intrigue curiosity, right? She's like constantly dancing around and saying, provoking my thoughts and going outrageously and trying to make sense of too much that doesn't necessarily need to be made sense of. The King of my mind will reveal his authority. So the Princess of Swords was curiosity, and the King of Swords, or sorry, the King of the King of Swords was authority. You know, it's the ultimate king, if you will, in the deck. And you know, if it's the mental faculty we're leaning in on, it's of the mind, and that's what this is. The final stanza in the song. Without, obviously, we circle back because, well, what would a song be if we didn't complete it to number 10 stanza by one repeating number 8 by number 9 and number 10 becoming the reiteration of the most focal part of this song, which ends up being 3 and 10. The movement allows the seeds of change to breathe. The movement occurs sitting within the silence communally. get back to the silence, get back to the space between actions of finding the creativity. So these are 3 different songs, and I know as long as the videos this is, that have just flowed out of me as a result of whatever work I've been putting in over the last week or month or year or lifetime of 40 years on this planet. I don't know. But this is what we're at right now today, no matter what, is the willingness to just go live, regardless of the fact that this channel would have 31,000 subscribers, but not a single actual live viewer to be spoken of, at least through the software systems that I'm using. It'll have its day in the sun, and the sun backwards is news, right? NUS. And if anything, I just attempt to be the better version of myself today, like I said millions of times. And if it does come down to it, and if this becomes too nonsensical beyond what I'm trying to put out, then chapter 3, A Lyrical Movement, may just have to move completely into the dark as far as my writing goes, so that I can actually approach this without such a constant feedback loop. And you just happen to be mistaken, and I don't know how that would work out, but no matter what, there's going to be a soundbite, but it won't be about what I'm actually working on. Who knows what will be revealed in that process. But I'm heavily leaning toward that, because this is getting ridiculous at this point. Anyhow, close to a full hour in. We got about 3 minutes left to a full hour. Thank you for watching. You're welcome to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. But that's not really possible at this point. So, peace be with you.